board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. Again, thank you all for attending. And President Gunther, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Okay. Well, let's move on to item 3, public comments for items that are not on the agenda this evening. Members of the public here?
Yeah, if anybody who's attending online would like to make any comments on any items that are not on the agenda, feel free to raise your hand. We'll make sure to call on you and receive any comments that you have.
And seeing no hands, we do have an item I believe that most of the people are here for. Then we'll move on to item consent calendar. Are there any items the directors would like to add to the consent calendar this evening?
I will move to add items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, and 5.8 to the consent calendar, please.
I have a motion.
I'll second that.
Second.
I would note that I was not in attendance at the special board meeting of October 24th, so on the item 1, certainly was here for the October 10th meeting.
So I guess question for council, should we remove it 4.1 from the consent calendar then?
So that's up to Director Weed. I mean, he can approve the minutes even though he wasn't here because it'll reflect that he wasn't here. But if he prefers to abstain, then you should remove it from the consent calendar.
I'm open to if I'm confident that the minutes are in sound shape for the board members. So I'm going to vote on it, but just making the note that I was not in attendance for that one meeting.
Yeah, it's identified already. And we'll hold a second. Sorry, wait. I'm usually the early one. So, we've had a motion for 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We added to the consent calendar and records. Concerns or comments? No. Move forward. Move forward with the motion to add those items to the consent calendar.
Yes, I'm moving the consent calendar.
Directors Huang?
Aye.
Sethy?
Yes.
Weed?
Aye.
Akbari? And Gunther?
Aye. Motion to move the consent calendar as amended.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Directors Huang?
Aye.
Sethy?
Yes.
Weed?
Aye.
Akbari? And Gunther?
Item on the agenda, we will move to item 5.9.
That's right, President Gunther. Item 5.9 is authorization of professional services agreement for the Customer Information System Upgrade Project. And I'll ask Mr. Wonderlich to go ahead and kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, members of the board, public, and staff. The district is currently using an older version of its customer information system software, which is licensed from Kayenta. Periodic upgrades were put on hold in support of the AMI project, which required a number of integrations between Kayenta and new systems. And now that the AMI project is complete, we feel that it's appropriate to proceed with an upgrade project for Kayenta so we can continue receiving top-level product support. Implementing the latest version will require Kayenta's project management, consulting, and technical services to ensure a successful project. There's adequate funding budgeted in the capital improvement program for this expenditure, and this item was previously reviewed in October by the Finance and Administration Committee. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Manjeen Baraj, who's our business analyst and who will be our project manager for this upgrade, and invite her now to give a presentation with a quick overview of the project.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and public. My name is Mandy Huang, and I'm a customer service business analyst. I'm I'm here to talk about the customer information system upgrade. I will talk about the current customer information system at the district, the CIS benefits for the district and customers, the CIS processes at the district, why we want to upgrade the CIS, its features, timelines, costs, and the team involved. Next slide, please. The current CIS system at the district is Kayenta at version 7.9. Kayenta is specifically designed to provide customer management and utility billing solution. The district initially onboarded to Kayenta in 2012. Next slide, please. Kayenta benefits for the district and its customers include, but not limited to, the district is for providing customer service. It has a meter-to-cash workflow. In progress. It allows to produce water bills. It allows to process payments. It allows to manage accounts, location, and meter information.
Actually, Manveen, I really hate to interrupt, but we have a note that one of the attendees is unable to hear. So we do want to pause for just a moment. So this is General Manager Ed Stevenson, just providing a bit of a report out. We had a technical issue here with sound and folks weren't able to hear. So we're back online now. Our apologies for the inconvenience. Just want to provide everybody with a real quick recap as to where we left off. We were on item 5.9, which we will restart from the beginning once we resume here. But I did want to let everybody know, for those folks who may have joined recently, so the board took action to amend the consent calendar to add items 5.1 through 5.8 to the consent calendar and then pass the consent calendar as amended. And also, I had previously shared some housekeeping remarks just to make sure everybody knows how to participate in our meeting today. And I'll just repeat some of that. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone, assuming everything works properly. Any member of the public present in person who wishes to make comments may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda, staff reports, and presentation materials for this meeting are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. And you may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. And I think President Gunther wanted to make sure that members of the public had an opportunity, in case they weren't able to hear and participate fully remotely previously, an opportunity to provide any comments on any items that are not listed on the agenda. Item number 3 on the agenda was the opportunity to do that. We just want to offer that opportunity again. So if anybody has any comments that they'd like to make for any item that's not currently on the agenda, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, seeing no one at the moment, which is fine, there'll be plenty of opportunities to provide comment as we move forward. But item 5.9 is where we are now. So 5.9 is authorization of professional services agreement for the Customer Information System Upgrade Project. And Mr. Wunderlich has some introductory remarks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening. The district is currently using an older version of our customer information system software, which is licensed from Kayenta. And periodic upgrades to the system were put on hold for a few years during the AMI project. And now that the AMI project is complete, we feel that it's time to upgrade Kayenta to the latest version to ensure continued product support. And implementing the latest version will require support from Kayenta for project management, consulting, and technical services to ensure a successful project. There's adequate funding in the capital improvement program for this expenditure, and this item was reviewed by the Finance and Administration Committee October 15, 2024. And so at this point, I'd like to welcome Manveen Baraj to the podium for a staff presentation. She's our business analyst in the customer service division and will be leading this project.
Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and public. My name is Manveen Parij, and I'm a customer service business analyst. I'm here to talk about the customer information system upgrade. Next slide, please. I will talk about the current customer information system at the district, the CIS benefits for the district and its customers, the CIS processes at the district, and why we want to upgrade the CIS along with its features, the timeline, the costs, and the team involved. Next slide, please. Currently, the CIS system at the district is Kayenta at version 7.9. Kayenta is specifically designed to provide customer management and utility billing solution. The district initially onboarded to Kayenta in 2012. Next slide, please. The Kayenta benefits for district and its customers include, but not limited to, for the district is it allows to provide customer service. It has a meter to cash workflow. It allows to produce water bills. It allows to process payments, and it allows to manage account, location, and meter information. The customers benefit as they receive customer service. They receive timely bills. They can request pay arrangements. They can inquire about their accounts, and they can request services. Next slide, please. Internal processes we carry out with the CIS include the setup of customer and account data. We can create and process service requests. We can schedule and generate water bills. We can do rates management. We can produce analytics for water consumption. We can report generation for water revenue. There are automated processes and nightly scheduled jobs. There are built-in portals personalized for district processes, such as automation of property tax reporting for past due balances. There are integrations with other district systems, such as My Smart Water Connect, the Badger MDMS, and CityWorks. Next slide, please. The current version 7.9 was last upgraded in 2020. Since then, upgrades were put on hold to support the Advanced Metering Infrastructure AMI project, its processes, and timelines. This version is nearing end of its useful life and must be upgraded to ensure ongoing support. Kayenta is the sole provider of the services mentioned previously. Next slide, please. We are looking to upgrade to the latest Kayenta version 9.2. Some of the features include an updated user interface. There's new functionality, such as for favorites and recent history. There are themes, such as light mode and dark mode. There are enhanced performance tracking and troubleshooting. There is improved base processes, such as workflow for search and integrations. This upgrade will be a complete out-of-the-box solution with no customizations. Next slide, please. The upgrade timeline is such that we are planning for kickoff in January of 2025, with design completion in February, with development completion in March, with testing completion in June, training and go live in July, and the project completion in August of 2025. Next slide, please. We are looking to enter into a professional services agreement with Kayenta and an amount not to exceed $250,000. There is adequate funding budgeted in the capital improvement program for this cost. Kayenta's services will include project management and consulting services, technical and data services, business intelligence and integration services, testing, training, and go-live support. The project team will include Kayenta's project management and technical team, along with district's project management and testing team. Next slide, please. The staff recommendation is, by motion, to authorize the general manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Kayenta, a division of Harris Computer Corporation, to provide project management, consulting, and technical services for the customer information system upgrade project in an amount not to exceed $250,000. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Questions?
Yeah, I see, Director Weed, you've got some,
Yes, is it necessary for the customer to download the Kayenta software in order to be able to take advantage of this upgrade?
No, the customer does not require to download Kayenta.
So when the customer gets the ability to read their water use and consumption on their cell phone, how many of our customers have that software currently?
So they are actually using our customer portal, the Water Connect portal that we have. They're using that to be able to view their consumption.
They don't require any special software themselves. It's not necessary for them to sign up for the service in order to be able to take advantage of it.
They do not sign up for Kayenta, no.
this is the back-end software.
This is the software we use primarily at the district.
And currently then, 100% of our customers have access to the automated AMI data to read what their meters are?
Through the customer portal, yes.
And yet, and there's no, we don't have, at one time I was told about 8% of our customers had actually taken advantage of the ability to, or had the capability to be able to look at it. You're now saying 100% of our customers do?
Customers that have the AMI meter capability and that have actually signed up with the customer portal have the capability.
And
have
then
the
how
ability.
many of our customers have signed up for the portal?
I believe that might be about 85%, but I don't have the exact number.
So
I will have
it's
to get
near
back to you.
universal sign up for the portal.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Okay, that's inverse of what, that's the inverse of what I understood it to be, but
Yeah.
that's good to
So
know.
if I could step in here, I think, do you know how many customers have signed up, Manaveen, for the app?
No, I do not have that number on hand.
Yeah, so I'm guessing, Director Weed, that the number you may have been given was in the early days of the implementation of the portal, the percentage of customers who had specifically signed up for the smartphone app. And so that number's been growing since we went live and was pretty small from the beginning. But that's to access the portal through the smartphone app. All customers have always had the ability to create an online account just going to the internet webpage without needing to download an app. And currently, about 85% of our customers have created an online user profile to access the portal just through the website.
That's helpful. And then the app itself has had a slow start, but hopefully over time will increase.
Yes, I would expect it to increase over time, but we have many more customers, I believe, who access it through the regular website portal rather than through the smartphone app.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I've done. I have it on my computer, but I don't have it yet on my cell phone.
So you're like most of our customers.
Thank you.
Dr. Sethy, comments?
Well, just thank you. I'm very glad to see that no customization, that is out of the box solution. I mean, we have in the past customized ourselves to the point that we couldn't update the software. So thank you. I am glad that staff definitely pay attention.
Any comments from online regarding this topic? Mr. Nishimura, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, President Gunther. So this is backend software that's dealing with customer data. Some questions, is this an on-prem application or is this hosted in the cloud? And if it's hosted in the cloud, go ahead.
It is an on-prem solution.
Okay, so the district is solely responsible for data integrity and security.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments in the room?
Okay, so, I do see, there is a comment, okay.
Mr. Brew?
Just a quick comment on this. So this is based on the idea that if we're going to give people more information, and then the expectation is that people are going to respond by knowing how much water they're spending, and they're going to, maybe reduce their usage because they know exactly what's going on with their account and that kind of stuff. There was an experiment done by some economists in Australia several years ago, and they tried this exact thing where they gave people better information, more real time, this kind of stuff. And it was a perverse outcome where people who were looking at the data, because a lot of people don't really care and are never going to look at the data, but the people who were, let's say, more informed, the high information customers were they quickly figured out, or they figured out that the water didn't cost that much, and they ended up using more water. So yeah, but that's not to say that if you raise the prices, that it I think there would be a price incentive. But it doesn't raise the prices; it just gives people more information. And in Australia, Australians don't do well with a lot of information.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay.
Okay, so there is a staff recommendation associated with this. Is by motion, authorize the general manager to enter into professional services agreement with Kayenta, a division of N. Harris Computer Corporation, to provide project management, consulting, and technical services for the customer information system upgrade project in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
Have the staff recommendation.
I'll move the staff recommendation on
We have a motion.
item 5.9.
We have a second.
I will second.
Second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
Akbari, and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, item 510 is resolution taking California Environmental Quality Act responsible agency actions based upon the Department of Water Resources previously certified environmental impact report and approving additional funding for the Delta Conveyance Project pre-construction work. And before I turn it over to Ms. Heides, I do see a hand up actually from Manny Leon. Just want to make sure we didn't miss Manny in the prior item. See, the hand has gone down. So before we turn it over to Ms. Heides to kind of get us started with this topic, I just want to make a couple of quick notes about just some context about this item. Obviously, this is related to Delta Conveyance, and just as a reminder, the district has not formally committed to participation in the ultimate Delta Conveyance project, but rather to support the planning and the design and pre-project activities. And so the board would not be making that ultimate project participation decision this evening, but rather to consider continuing to move forward with pre-project related planning and other activities. If we don't participate in these preliminary phases, we wouldn't have the choice to participate in the ultimate project, and our customers would be excluded from any benefits to water reliability and resilience that are contemplated by the project. Now we have, before we get going, I just wanted to note we have received some public comments in writing already on this topic, so I'll ask Mr. Salinas just to quickly give us a summary.
Yes, we have received 6 written comments, all via email. 2 out of the 6 were identified to be from our service area, and all 6 were in expressing opposition to this item. All 6 of the written comments were forwarded to the board.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and carry on with the item, and I'll turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides.
Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. I think we're going to get the presentation up here and running shortly, but I'll just go over a few key terms on the next slide that I'm going to be using tonight and throughout the presentation. Just a few highlights from here. The DCA, or Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, I'll be referring to, along with the DCP, or the Delta Conveyance Project itself, DWR for the California Department of Water Resources, and SWP for the State Water Project. Those would be the most commonly used throughout the presentation. By way of brief background about the State Water Project, it's California's vast storage and delivery system of dams, reservoirs, aqueducts, and power plants and pumping plants spanning more than 700 miles to deliver water throughout the state. The rain and snow falls in the north and east of the state, but the state's major population centers are in the central, west, and south. The State Water Project serves 27 million people, including ACWD's customers, and 750,000 acres of farmland. It provides for about 40% of the district's treated water demands. Next slide, please. So the Delta Conveyance Project itself is a project to develop new infrastructure facilities in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta that are necessary to move water as part of the State Water Project, or SWP. The project includes 2 new intake facilities in the North Delta with a total capacity of 6,000 CFS cubic feet per second. That's toward the top part of the graph that you, or the map that you see on the right. There's also 1 below ground tunnel that conveys water from the new intakes on the north end of the Delta down to the South Delta. There's also a new pumping plant, aqueducts, and a discharge structure connecting directly to Bethany Reservoir on the California Aqueduct. And you can see that at the very bottom of the map along the alignment that's shown. Next slide, please. As to why the project is needed, it's really a project to modernize the aging State Water Project infrastructure in the Delta to restore and protect the long-term reliability of water deliveries. So DWR's 2023 Delivery Capability Report, which they put out every 2 years, an update to this report, and that report indicates that the State Water Project reliability will continue to decline in the coming years. So that's something that is really helping to be addressed by the project. Additionally, the project protects the State Water Project against disruptions from sea level rise, hydrologic effects of climate change, and seismic threats. And there's a link at the bottom of this slide to the to the Delivery Capability Report as well for anyone who's interested in more in-depth information on that. Next slide, please. This graphic shows State Water Project allocations for the last several years since 1995 in the blue bars. And as you can see with the yellow line that tracks the long-term reliability, it's been declining over time. And on the right side of the graph with the dashed yellow lines, that's the long-term projections from the recent Delivery Capability Report, really showing what we should expect in terms of the reliability of the State Water Project over time, and that it will decline, expected to decline from about a current estimate of 53% to somewhere between 41 to 46% by 2043. Next slide, please. So to address some of the benefits that are specific to the Alameda County Water District related to the project, as I said earlier, the State Water Project provides about 40% of ACWD's annual water supplies, and the DCP addresses risks to the current system and provides seismic resiliency, as it will protect against disruption due to a significant Delta earthquake, and also it provides protection from disruption due to levee failures and salt intrusion. It provides climate change adaptation for us, the risks of levee failures and salt intrusion that are expected to increase with climate change. Also provides some adaptation in that it improves operational flexibility and provides for additional capacity to safely divert during high flow events in the wet season. And last, ACWD's team's analyses of DWR's modeling indicate that the DCP is expected to help bolster the State Water Project reliability that you saw declining on the previous slide in order to offset future anticipated declines. It will also provide flexibility to access wet season water from the new intake, and ultimately this will enhance ACWD's own long-term reliability of the State Water Project within our portfolio. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit of a review. As the board will recall, we had in August a presentation from Graham Bradner of the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority and Carrie Buckman from DWR. And one of the portions of that presentation went over in more detail the updated cost estimate for the project and the benefit cost analysis that had been released in May 2024. And so just a short review, the overall cost of construction of the project is currently estimated at $20.1 billion in undiscounted 2023 dollars. DWR's analyses of an overall look at the state analysis shows that for every dollar spent, $2.20 in benefits is expected to be generated across the state. And the project also includes, and the cost estimate also includes, the $200 million for a community benefits program. And more information on the cost estimate is available at the link at the bottom of this slide as well. So next you might wonder, well, what does that mean for ACWD? So I will go ahead and we'll switch to the next slide, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. John Wunderlich, our Director of Finance and Administration, who will cover our current evaluation of the cost to ACWD customers.
Great, thank you, Ms. Heides. So what we've done is we've taken that overall project cost estimate, and we've tried to distill that down into the impact to our ratepayer. And so we went through a number of steps to accomplish that analysis as outlined on this slide. First, we've assumed the district is responsible for 1.15% of project costs. That is slightly higher than our overall share of the state water project as a whole because there are some contractors not participating in the project. We've assumed that bonds would be issued over a 40-year time horizon at a 5% interest rate. And obviously, those assumptions are subject to considerable change. So just understand that that's the basis of these estimates. And based on that, we've determined what the maximum annual debt service would be, as well as within that cost estimate for construction provided by the state, there are also estimates of operating and maintenance costs provided for each participating agency. So that's also been factored in. We have a number of assumptions that are made in our various planning documents, our urban water management plan specifically about future customer growth. And so we have made assumptions that over that, kind of 20-year horizon between now and 2045, that there would be the customer growth as estimated within our urban water management plan. But we have assumed no growth in total water consumption consistent with what we've generally observed in recent years. And so, and then kind of the last major assumption is we've assumed that it's 100% funded on water rates. So this represents the full cost of participation in the project. And so when you put all of that together, then the impact in 2045 dollars for typical residential customers, a little over $9 a month. And if you discount that to today's dollars, that's a little under $5 per month for the typical residential customer for their share of the Delta Conveyance project. Great.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Next slide, please. So just a few brief updates. There's a lot of activities happening, but some key recent activities at the state level related to the Delta Conveyance project include the release and certification of the final environmental impact report in December 2023. And a link to that is included here at on the slide, and as well as in the staff report for this item. The incidental take permit, or ITP, application for the California Endangered Species Act coverage was submitted to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in April 2024. That's one of the key permits that would be needed to operate the project. And a water rights petition for a change in point of diversion for the project was submitted, or the hearing at the State Water Resources Control Board public hearing has been set for January 2025. Next slide, please. There's still a number of other planning and permitting activities that are anticipated to go on through the end of 2026. And this slide just shows some of those key activities that will be continuing through that time. And more information on permitting and project planning, it can be located at the Delta Conveyance Project website that's also listed at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. So just to recap some of ACWD's own board actions to date related to the project, ACWD resolution number 20-006 was approved in November 2020. And that resolution indicated that the district desired a participation level in the DCP at about a 1.15% share. That resolution also approved a funding agreement with DWR for our share of the DCP planning costs. And we, at that time, also approved the first 2 years of funding for 2021 and 2022 up to about 1.3 million. And the agreement included flexibility to provide additional funds without an amendment. So the agreement, however, did include the possibility of additional funding at that time, and that was in the amount of just over $2.2 million for 2023 and 2024, should the board decide to continue that. So in April of 2022, the board did approve resolution 22-030 that approved that funding to be submitted to DWR to continue the planning activities. And that funding that we've provided to date is expected to cover activities through 2025. Next slide, please. So at this time, DWR is requesting a funding commitment for additional funding needs for calendar years 2026 and 2027. The funding is needed to continue the planning, design, permitting, and pre-construction work for the project. And funds can be provided by the district to continue our this work under the existing agreement that we've already made with DWR that I described earlier via a board resolution authorizing the funds and a letter to DWR. And then our share of the cost you can see on the right of this slide for 2026 and 2027 would be up to $3,438,554.25. And just as a note, costs for the DCP participation are incorporated in the district's financial planning, and this funding will be included in the upcoming 2-year budget, should the board approve it. Next slide, please. So the funding is one of the things that is being put forward for board action tonight. And additionally, there's a CEQA action included. And so some back story, DWR as the lead agency certified the final EIR on December 21st, 2023. The funding that we are proposing to approve is anticipated to be used for some pre-construction work. And so staff's recommendation is to take, along with the funding request action, to take certain CEQA actions as a responsible agency. And those would be to consider DWR's final EIR, which is available at the link below at the bottom of the slide, and has been provided to the board and included in the board packet. Also to make responsible agency findings, to adopt DWR's finding of facts, to adopt the statement of overriding considerations, to authorize staff to file a notice of determination. The proposed ACWD board action does not approve or commit to DCP construction at this time. The approval action is to provide additional funding to allow for pre-construction work. Next slide, please. So a few additional considerations here at the district. As I mentioned, the DCA and DWR provided an update on the DCP and the updated cost estimate and project benefits at the August 8th, 2024 regular board meeting. Staff provided a DCP update at the September 25th, 2024 Water Resources and Conservation Committee most recently. And approval of this item will help meet strategic plan goal 2.2, protect existing imported water supplies. Additionally, approval of the item, as Mr. Stevenson mentioned, would allow ACWD to remain engaged in the project and planning processes. Next slide, please. So tonight, staff's recommendation is rather lengthy and included on the slide there, but I'll go ahead and read it. One, taking actions under the California Environmental Quality Act as a responsible agency, including adopting the CEQA findings of the lead agency for the Delta Conveyance Project and adopting a statement of overriding considerations regarding the potentially significant impacts that may result from the pre-construction work related to the Delta Conveyance Project. And two, approving additional funding and authorizing the general manager to execute a letter that commits the district to provide funding to the California Department of Water Resources for the district's share of the Delta Conveyance Project pre-construction work through 2027 in the amount of up to $3,438,554.25. And I do just want to make a quick note that we discovered that on the title of the resolution that was included in the board packet, there was a typo on the amount of money. The one shown here that ends in 554 and 25 cents is the correct amount and was correct in all the other documents and places. But we just would like to note that it's being corrected on the resolution and there's copies of it here. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Why don't we open it up to public comment?
Mr. Abreu, I believe you have a presentation you're going to try to fit into 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and give it a shot and see how it works out.
Okay, well, I'll start by speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club opposes this project for a long list of reasons. I'm not going to go through all the reasons, but I'll pick a few of them. The heavy cost of this, and instead of looking at your customer's bill and saying it's going up by $5 a month and the average bill is whatever it is per month, look at your budget. Your budget is something like $130 million a year, and they're asking you to pay $230. So that's nearly double your annual budget is going into this one project. And the same for for Metropolitan. It's even worse because I think their budget is only Metropolitan Water District, which hasn't voted on this yet, is going to fund half of this project, and their budget is something like $2 or $3 billion a year, and they're being asked to pay half of 20, which is 10. I don't know how they're going to swallow that amount of cost with that small of a budget. Let's see what else. The local tribes have been opposed to this for a long time, and they've relied on some of these natural resources and salmon and things for eons, and it's best not to mess with the natural flows is the lessons of large water projects that have obstructed flows on rivers for the last 100 years. They've been generally bad. That's why there's so much public opposition. The concept of transporting water across the state is very expensive. Water is very heavy and very low value, so the local water supplies are strongly preferred by the Sierra Club. Things like stormwater capture. The cost-benefit analysis is extremely flawed. Let me give you some example. They're talking about costs of something like $3,000 an acre foot in their cost-benefit analysis. $3,000 is already pretty high. And that assumes that they can get out a maximum of over 400,000 acre feet 4 million acre feet per year. Over 4 million and that's on this graph that they put out. So when you had that graph of allocations, that was based on a maximum of 4 million plus acre feet per year. Now, if that was going to improve reliability, then down here when we were getting low allocations, the graph for with project would be up high, would be shifted upwards. but it gets shifted upwards at around the 50 or 60% mark, over halfway. Therefore, this thing doesn't really improve reliability, or it barely improves reliability, because reliability is not delivering a certain amount per year. It's shifting the percentages such that we can get more percentages, more years, and that does not do that at all. It just gives you more water during the wet years, and it doesn't give you more water during the dry years, which is when water is most valuable. The DCP, the cost-benefit analysis, just pretends like all water is the same, and it's not. Now, the other thing on that graph that was presented was they showed you all the percentage allocations, but nobody bothers to plot it out versus how many acre feet were being delivered each year. And if you do plot it out, it's a straight line. And that means that every year for the last 10 years, the Department of Water Resources has been assuming that the maximum delivery capacity of their system, based on their own percentages, was 3,150,000, which is 3.15 million acre feet per year. But last year in 2023, they delivered 100%. They actually delivered 100% allocation, and they only gave out 2.7 million acre feet per year, which is 14% less. And that is your maximum
30
capacity.
seconds left.
This thing is based on a 4 million acre feet per year at capacity. The actual data is based on 2.7 million acre feet per year, which is, in other words, you're dropping your deliveries by 37%, and that raises your cost by 60%. 37% fewer deliveries increases cost by 60%. This is the most flawed analysis in the world. With they haven't delivered 4 million acre feet in decades. Thank you.
Okay, next,
Yeah, we have one more speaker in
in
the room.
one more room, speaker.
We'll get to folks online here in a moment.
And we should just be clear that the time that's being allotted is 5 minutes. That's the time that's specified in the board rules of conduct. That's the district practice. So the district secretary is giving the speakers a 30-second heads up when the 5 minutes is up.
Awesome. Good evening, President Gunther, General Manager Stevenson, and the directors of the Alameda County Water District. My name is Lane Fajot, and I am speaking tonight on behalf of Sierra Club, California, and its 400,000 members statewide. I grew up in Brentwood, just over the hill, and am a resident of the Delta, where the Delta Conveyance Project will have catastrophic consequences. I am speaking tonight on this item to ask that you either delay voting or vote no on funding the remaining planning of the Delta Conveyance Project. I understand that you're in a difficult position, trying to balance providing clean, reliable water at affordable rates, all while promoting sustainable use of water resources. And I want to emphasize that funding the next phase of the Delta Conveyance Project will not advance your district's goals. DWR purports that the tunnel will increase water security in the face of earthquakes, drought, and climate change. A melting snowpack and rising sea absolutely necessitates sweeping infrastructure improvements, but the tunnel will not aid the security of our water systems given these crises. In reality, the construction and operation of the tunnel will increase greenhouse gas emissions while failing to mitigate the worst effects of climate change on our water systems. By pumping water to the California aqueduct at the Delta's northern inflow sites instead of at the current southern pumping plants, millions of acre feet of water will completely bypass the Delta, worsening existing salinization and temperature problems throughout the ecosystem. Moreover, as snowpack melts earlier and earlier, the benefits reaped from the Delta tunnel will become increasingly negligible, and we will have wasted over $20 billion that could have gone towards other water system improvements. So how do we guarantee that the ACWD water supply is safe for years to come? Part of it comes from ensuring the state water project, which starts with levee stabilization. Across the Delta, land subsidence has put levees at risk of collapse and will continue to threaten the Delta and state water project even after construction of the tunnel is completed. Investing in levee stabilization will protect communities up and down the state who rely on water that flows through the Delta. And of course, we also have to support the development of local water supplies. Alameda is doing an incredible job of this, with over 40% of your supply coming from local basins and local sources. We should be expanding on this by building water recycling plants, stormwater capture systems, and optimizing our water usage with efficiency upgrades to reduce demand. Spending $3.5 million tonight
and over $230 million 2 years from now, means that these crucial projects that protect the integrity of ACWD's water supply without compromising the health of the Delta are deprioritized. They require our energy and financial commitment now, and $200 million could go a long way to localize ACWD's supplies. Instead, this $200 million is going to be used to divert key water inflows from the collapsing ecosystem in my backyard that currently depends on it. Indicator species like the Delta smelt are already functionally extinct. Chinook salmon populations have been measured at record lows in recent years, despite relatively good water years. Harmful algal blooms that release toxins into our air and water are on the rise, jeopardizing the health of Delta residents. This is the state of the Delta ecosystem given current water pumping before any construction on the tunnel is started. If you can't commit to halting all funding tonight, I ask that you delay and continue your vote until late spring for 2 reasons. First, it's entirely possible that the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, responsible for over 47% of project funding, votes to stop spending on the project during their December vote. MWD has been more amicable to supporting Delta communities than ever before, and should they decide to rescind their support of the tunnel, your district will either have to double your financial commitments or lose all of the money you've invested in the project thus far. We just saw this exact situation happen with the Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion. Second, the updated Bay Delta Plan will be released in April. Should the Bay Delta Plan impose stricter regulations on pumping, which is incredibly likely given that the Delta ecosystem is in collapse, the 6,000 cubic feet per second pumping maximum will be curtailed, and the cost per cubic foot of water will grow dramatically for ratepayers. This will make the project completely unaffordable and force the district to drop its support. There are too many uncertain factors that must be resolved before ACWD has the knowledge that they need to make an informed decision on whether or not they should continue to invest in the tunnel. As such, please vote no tonight on item 5.10 and continue the vote until at least after the release of the Bay Delta Plan in April, so you can make an informed decision on how to spend millions of dollars of your ratepayers' money. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Hello.
All right, we'll start with Vicar Castillo.
Good evening, folks. My name is Kyle Griffith. I'm speaking on behalf of Californians for Water Security. We're a statewide coalition of labor unions, business organizations, social justice advocates, and more formed in support of the Delta Conveyance Project. I wanted to commend the staff for their presentation tonight because it really reiterates what tonight's vote is about, and that is gaining more information. Major infrastructure projects like the Delta Conveyance Project require a wealth of experience from a number of statewide agencies as well as local water districts like ACWD. And voting to continue funding this project means that you're gaining all of the information necessary in order to make the final decision on full participation in this project. It is not a commitment to fund it tonight. The information gained by finishing the planning and permitting process for DCP will empower this board to make the right decision when it comes time for that vote. I wanted to reiterate that 40% of the district's water supply is conveyed through the state water project. That is a significant portion that will have to be replaced if this project or the water that is provided through state water project is no longer available due to the impacts of climate change. And I think all of us know that the impacts of climate change are here and they're being felt today. Opting out of this project closes this door forever, and it will be up to the district to find other ways to replace that 40%. One of the big impacts that should be considered is impacts on new construction. They have to demonstrate that they have reliable access to water 20 years past build out. And if there is not a reliable source of water in the region, then construction will not continue. We're already seeing that in other parts of the state, primarily along the Central Coast in the Central Valley, where cities like Cambria and Los Osos have had to halt all new construction as a result of water supply issues. We highly encourage the board to continue funding this project because it is an investment in future reliability. There is no new water that will be captured by this project. It is simply reinforcing the infrastructure that conveys so much of ACWD's supplies. So we appreciate the concerns coming from project opponents, but that's what differentiates this version of the project to previous iterations. It has been redesigned, it has been rerouted and resized to make sure it is the right size to balance the the ecological needs, as well as providing enough water to the participating agencies in this project to remain solvent. We really appreciate you guys taking this opportunity, and we look forward to continuing to support ACWD and the other water agencies as they move this project forward. Thank you so much for your time.
May I ask for a clarification here, please? It looks like the name of a law firm or something like that, and I'm trying to be clear in my own mind as to who is speaking on behalf of what group or association.
Yes, sir. My name is Kyle Griffith. Bicker Castillo Fairbanks is my employer. We're a public affairs firm. Unfortunately, I am unable to change my name based on the current settings on Zoom.
And who are you representing?
A statewide coalition called Californians for Water Security. We have a coalition of organizations that are supporting the DCP.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, next will be Manny Leon.
Hi, hi. My name is Manny Leon. I'm here on behalf of the California Alliance for Jobs. We are a labor management organization representing the construction industry. First, I want to specify that we are in strong support of the Delta Conveyance Project. Second, we want to align our comments with the Californians for Water Security who just commented. And a few additional comments that we'd like to make are that nearly 30% of the overall water for the South Bay area, including Alameda and Santa Clara counties, flows through the State Water Project. The State Water Project is the main water distribution network in California, but it relies on aging and deteriorating infrastructure to deliver our water supply. Many of these dirt levees are over a century old and could collapse in a major earthquake or flood, which could cut off water supplies to millions of Californians over a year. We must invest in the Delta Conveyance Project to protect water for our region. Continuing to fund the next phase of the planning and permitting for the DCP is an investment in our water security of our region. Again, my name is Manny Leon. I'm calling on behalf of the California Alliance for Jobs in strong support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Martha Krieger.
Hi, my name is Martha Krieger. I am the chair for the Sierra Club San Francisco Bay chapter. Thank you for allowing us to make comments. I want to echo the earlier comments by Sierra Club individuals. They were terrific. And I want to add the following. There is no reliability with this project. They claim that they offer water supply reliability with the least amount of environmental damage possible, but that is incorrect. The Delta is already, and the Bay are already under a tremendous amount of stress. This will not make it better. We already have fish populations that have dropped massively, and that speaks to not as much the fish population, but the health of the Delta itself. I want to remind people that 68% of California's environmental justice communities are in this area, and we are impacting them without their consent. They universally tend to oppose this project because, again, it's not reliable. It's got massive environmental damage. It decimates Delta communities and results in higher water costs. I also want to point out that this wouldn't be done until 2045. So we're putting millions of dollars into it now and billions over time, and we have no result in the next 20 years. And we're doing that before we even get a plan regionally or until April. I don't know why we're rushing to do this now. My bottom line is that local and regional water supplies are the only supplies that are truly resilient to the uncertainties of climate change and seismic risk. And if you put all this money into something that will not come true until later down the line without an estimation of the costs or the challenges until then, and you haven't really done a regional plan, you are not able to do that work now. I just think it's a fiscal mistake. I think it's super damaging to the environment. And our 25,000 members and 25,000 supporters just in this area totally agree. We absolutely oppose this project. We hope that if you cannot oppose it yourselves, that you will put off the decision until you get more information this spring. Thank you.
Very much.
Next, we have Ken.
I assume that's me. Thank you very much, President Gunther and members of the board. It's obvious that the Delta conveyance is a contentious issue with factions jockeying about with respect to the environment, fish, jobs, or growth versus anti-growth. But as was pointed out by the general manager, tonight's discussion is not about committing the district to the project, but merely keeping a seat at the table. If the district were to leave, the district would no longer have a say in the project. In some ways, it's like sitting out an election. Others make a decision for you. One of the strengths of the district is the diversity of water sources. Single-handedly cutting off a supply which accounts for roughly 40% of our current supplies is foolhardy. That does not say that the district should not conduct a critical analysis of all alternatives when the time comes to commit to the project. However, that is not the question before us tonight. This is perhaps a time to kick the can down the road and keep the options open by remaining in a position to participate and modulate the project. The district's primary mission is to ensure reliable supplies of water to its customers. Doing so in a manner which is least impactful to the environment is important, but secondary to reliability. Until an alternative which is clearly superior to the Delta conveyance is available, one should not close the doors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ali.
Hi, my name is Alex Spare, and I'd like to speak in support of the Sierra Club. I don't think anybody actually wants this project. It's an ecosystem disaster. We can't take more water out of the Delta. And I would encourage you to wait until the full report comes in April to see if it's even legally possible to take out more water, which I don't think it will be. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we had one more speaker that had their hand up.
Yes, CC had their hand up a moment ago. CC, if you'd like to make a comment, this would be a good time. Okay, and I don't see any other hands up from folks that haven't spoken
Any other
yet.
hands? Okay, I'm not seeing any others. Then we will go ahead. I'm going to close up this public comment on this item and move to the directors. Start. Director Weed will start.
Okay. Well, I serve, I represent this board and serve as a director on the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority. And it's my understanding, first clarifications, there were three options for going forward on the Delta Conveyance, a accelerated program, moderate program, or a slow program.
that these numbers are based on a moderate program going forward.
Yeah, there was a number of different thoughts on cost, but this is based on sort of a moderate
Yes.
plan for work for 26 and
Right, thank you.
27.
It wasn't in the, I didn't see that in the report. That's why I wanted to get the clarification. The CEQA for Delta Conveyance calls for a 10.2 foot sea level rise at the Golden Gate. Those who argue that we are trying to maintain an ecosystem in the Delta in the face of it over up to 10 feet of sea level rise, I should reconsider their logic. The critical factor to us is not the water quantity, but rather the water quality. The potential for the complete loss of 40% of our water supply because of water quality that is municipal and industrial user we could not economically accept, I think it becomes daunting. This is a one-year extension for funding. And we're less than 1.15% of the total project. And I support the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Director Sethy.
Go next. Among the speakers here, I am most closely aligned with Mr. Nishimura in terms of moving forward on this effort. For those in attendance, I will state that I am the chair of the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority and have been part of that authority representing this district since its inception. So I'm very much in favor of a Delta conveyance system. Otherwise, I wouldn't be leading the effort. Next, I grew up with this district. My father served most of his career as in the engineering department here. And I'm also a bit of a historian on the district, which is the oldest county water district in the state of California. I am not aware of a single director in the entire history of this organization that has opposed a Delta conveyance system. That has been an inherent part of the philosophy of this district to ensure reliability to our local area. It doesn't matter to me personally, and I represent the ratepayers here in this district, so I state this with a lot of thought. It doesn't matter to me if it costs $20 billion or $50 billion. We are a $3 trillion economy that's going to double in size by the end of this forecast period. This is pennies on the dollar or fractions of pennies on the dollar investment in protecting what is really the economic engine of California, and that is Silicon Valley. In our own service area, we have over 1,000 or 1,100 high technology companies that are dependent upon not only the reliability of water coming through the system, through the Delta, but also the water quality. I disagree emphatically with those comments that say that we're taking more water out of the Delta. This is a transportation system, a conveyance system of taking water from the Sacramento River in the north, around the Delta, and it doesn't take any more water out of the Delta than is currently being shipped south. I also disagree with those that state that or think that water is being diverted to Southern California and that they will be taking in a lot more water than they currently are. That is absolutely false and misleading to the public. You need to read the DWR report, which I did in full, on the statement of facts. You cannot disagree with the statement of facts and assert an opinion And so those that think this is a giant sucking sound of water down to Southern California, it's completely misleading. It's the same amount of water that would be routed around the Delta as is today. And in my opinion, this is a reliability project over and above everything else. And we have to think about the future threats through the end of this century and next century to sea level rise first. As I mentioned in the last board meeting, arc weather events where we have major flooding coming through the Delta. We have 1,100 miles of levees that are vulnerable. We just saw one up on Highway 4, crossing over to Stockton right now, where the levee is near breaching, without any major weather event going on right now. And the last major earthquake on the Hayward Fault was in 1868. It has a periodicity going back 2 millennia of 90 to 165 years, averages 140 years. And guess what, folks? We're in year 156 right now. So we're past the average and we're nearing the maximum. And we didn't have 1,100 miles of levee back in 1868. So you can just imagine what would happen if we had seawater going all the way down to the pumping plants in Tracy. It would suffocate not only the lower Bay Area, but all of Southern California. And by the way, when we talk about Southern California, we need to address the fact that all three South Bay contractors, Zone 7, ACWD, Santa Clara Valley Water District, we are part of Southern California. Anything south of the Delta is part of Southern California. And so the last, not only are we susceptible to earthquake, sea level rise, and arc events that could destroy the levee system in the Delta, and I agree with my colleague on the board, the Delta is doomed over time, absolutely doomed. And so we need to do whatever we can to prepare for ensuring that we have a reliable supply of water that feeds the engine of our California economy right here. And I will leave it at that. And I agree with Mr. Nishimura most of all that we need to continue the study of the project until, we make a serious evaluation as to whether to participate or not. But I totally support this project.
Well, I guess I'm next. So first, I would actually like to thank all the speakers. I personally agree with most of the comments, including the Sierra Club's comments regarding environmental impacts. However, as a director, this put me in a pretty interesting position. It's a conundrum. Having access to affordable clean water is a health and safety issue. It is also a right for all Californians, including the customers of ACWD. To support this right, we have, as a district, committed to provide high-quality water at a reasonable price to our customers. As you have heard earlier, State Water Project supplies 40% of our water. When we first embarked on this project back in 2020, we did a lot of work. We evaluated the pros and cons, cost of the project, the impacts to our ratepayers. We discussed potential alternative water supplies, and I specifically asked about project off-ramps. In 2020, we concluded that there are no reasonable, cost-effective alternative water supplies available. Therefore, we need to participate in this project and to have a seat at the table. However, we have also committed to continue to evaluate reasonable alternative supplies and a commitment to use the project off-ramp to exit the project if there is a reasonable and cost-effective alternative. To support this approach, we have as a district participated in regional desalination project discussions, and we continue to evaluate the viability of recycled water. Our latest analysis actually indicates that there are still no cost-effective alternatives to state water project. We actually found that recycled water costs 3 times as much as state water project water and will negatively impact affordability for our customers. ACWD is committed to be a good environmental steward, and as demonstrated by our 2 fish ladders and cooperations with local environmental organizations. However, we also need to fulfill our primary mission to supply affordable water to meet our customers' health and safety needs. Therefore, we need to have a seat at the table and participate in this project to ensure the reliability of 40% of our water supply. As noted earlier, this is not a commitment to participate in the construction of the project. I would personally have a problem if this is a commitment to construction. We will, and I will make sure I nag the staff enough to continue to evaluate reasonable alternatives and make the best decision for our customers. And I really appreciate all the speakers taking the time out to express their opinions. So thank you.
President Gunther, may I add one other thought here, please?
Sure.
So, one of the key founders of our water district was Joseph Shin, and he and his brother Charles Shin, who was a classmate of President Theodore Roosevelt College, were co-founders of the Sierra Club. And were part of the original dozen members that created the Sierra Club. And in fact, Shin Peak in California is named after Charles Shin, who was the first supervisor of the Forest Service in California. And I was a longtime member of the Sierra Club, active member, a presenter at many of the Sierra Club South Bay meetings. And I ended up terminating my membership because I started to realize what had happened over 100 years. And I gave Mr. Stevenson, some of our staff, a report that was produced by Maven's Network. You may be familiar with that out in the valley, on the 100-year history of conveyance through the Delta. And what is kind of shocking and ironic in the report is that when the first peripheral canal was approved in concept by the State Water Resources Control Board in the 1960s, we actually had a Northern California holiday for all the fishermen, all the environmental groups, Sierra Club, all the other environmental groups that were involved, because they went up to Sacramento to the hearings to celebrate what they thought was a victory at the time for a peripheral canal. And now the same organizations have taken a complete U-turn. Why? Because they discovered that there's so much money involved in lawsuits. And I found out my membership money was going to pay mostly for attorneys that were fighting lawsuits. That's my personal conviction. And this is insane that the very organizations that supported the conveyance system in the 1960s and had spent decades fighting for it are now the very people that are opposed. Final comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll finish up here then. This is a very contentious issue. I support this, by the way. I have supported the project for a long time. I am old enough and remember the peripheral canal battles. I did not live in California back then and didn't fully understand them. I understand them now, and I live in Northern California. I consider myself to be Northern California. I always thought it was a Southern California, Northern California thing, and I realize it's not. The other thing is, we're not sending any more water south. This is about reliability. I'm an ex-Coast Guard officer. I know what it is like not to have water. I've said this in the past. Your water's not worth anything if you turn the tap on and it doesn't come out. And believe me, when you're on a ship in the Coast Guard, That is always a possibility. When you're the chief engineer or the auxiliary watch officer and you're responsible for that water, believe me, you think about reliability. You always wish you had one more tank. I've had water taste like diesel fuel. It was safe to drink. Believe me, I don't want to see stuff in our water that's safe to drink that tastes like diesel fuel. I've been there. I don't want any of our public to have to do that. The concept of sea showers, you have not experienced that. Trust me, I have. Do not want to go there. I heard tonight that we're rushing this. Rushing what? We were talking about this in the 60s. This country has stopped building stuff. In 1863 to 1869, we built a railroad across the country practically using hand tools. And today, we should, with the amount of money this project is costing, be able to fix all the levees, be able to fix all the roads, be able to build a railroad to LA, a high-speed railroad, and build this project. But what are one of our problems? It took us 20 years in this district to build a fish ladder, or two of them, that everybody wanted. Well, not everybody, but close to it.
There was an objection here.
And there was one objection, but we all wanted that. But it took us 20 years during the time we had some of the most environmentally friendly agencies and groups in the country at the federal level and the state level. It still took us 20 years. That's what frustrates me. Why is this happening? We got to start listening to each other. I don't think we are. I read the comments. That's my responsibility as a director to read everything that comes forward to me. I've seen worse. A couple thousand comments, that was a lot to read. I read them all. I heard everybody tonight, and there are people that are going to be out there, probably they're going to say, I didn't hear you. No, I heard you. I'm going to disagree, but I heard you and I will listen and continue to listen. But this is going to give us, hopefully, information that we will be able to use when we have to decide to make our real commitment. Because we are talking about a lot of money here with a project that's going to take, as far as I'm concerned, way too long to build. As far as I'm concerned, this should not be finished in 2045. This shouldn't take more than 6 years. That's how long it took to build a railroad across the country using hand tools. And I'm disgusted with where we are today with building projects. So I'm supporting the item tonight. I still want to listen to everybody, but I wish we'd get off our feet and start doing something, because the Delta is going to fail. And the fish are not going to get better if we don't. The levees are going to fail. We're all in this together. We got to start acting that way. So hopefully we can have a valid conversation about this. I know everybody's coming back. We're still in the game. We haven't made a commitment. Welcome to come back and comment again. Maybe we'll change our opinion. We're looking at the cost. But this is going to give us a lot more information to make a very valid and right decision for our ratepayers. I just wish it wouldn't take 6 years. I'd love to see this project finished. I'm beginning to question that I will. And I don't mean sitting on the board. I mean being alive. And that is sad. The sad state of affairs. Anyway, with that, I guess we're ready to take a roll.
Do we have a motion?
We don't have a motion yet.
I will simply make the motion to approve the staff recommendations of 1 and 2 here. It's too long to read, so I hope that's acceptable.
We got a motion. We have a second by Director Weed.
Yes.
Further comments? I'm done.
Check those two
There
hands.
goes
Two more hands.
Never went down.
Yeah, I see a couple of hands raised still. We did have public comments previously on the item. I'm just wondering if those are
They were still,
just residual hand raises. I don't think they ever went down.
I've been watching. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and, Secretary, call the roll, please.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
Ekbari, and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on, 5.11.
Okay, 5.11 is a presentation and acceptance of the Alameda County Water District's audited financial statements for fiscal year 2023 and 24. And I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Wunderlich first.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The district prepares an annual comprehensive financial report each year, and that's comprised of an introduction with an overview of the district and recent accomplishments, management's analysis of the financial statements, then the financial statements and related notes, and then a statistical and historical information section. Baker Tilly, the district's auditor, recently completed its audit of the district's financial statements and issued an unmodified or clean opinion. The auditor presented their results to the Finance and Administration Committee October 15th, 2024. And we have with us this evening Mr. Calvin Cho, the district's accounting and treasury manager, and Mr. Dan LaHaye, who's the director with Baker Tilly, who will provide us with the presentation on the financial results as well as the audit results and process. And once their presentation is done, we do have a recommended action this evening to, by motion, accept the audited financial statements and accompanying reports for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2024. So with that, I will turn it over for the presentation.
Good afternoon. This is Calvin Cho, Accounting and Treasury Manager. And today I'm here to present the fiscal year 2023-2024 ACFR numbers. And first, we'll be going over the balance sheet, and then we'll go over the income statement. So on top, you'll see asset and current asset. Current asset, that's the cash. And non-current asset, that's the long-term investment that we set aside to be used in the future. And then non-current capital asset, that will be the capital asset, like the building, meters, and such. And deferred outflow of resources, that will be the prepaid expenses. And going to the liability, we have the current liability, which is due within a year, and non-current, which is due with more than a year, and then deferred inflow of resources, which is deferred revenue. So if you look at the bottom, first of all, the asset and the deferred outflow of resources for fiscal year ended 2024 is $854.2 million, which is $33.9 million higher than the previous year. And for the liability, deferred inflow of resources, the total is $205.4 million, which is $18.6 million higher than the previous year. And our net position is $648.8 million, which is $15.3 million higher than previous year.
Mr. Joe, may I ask a question here as we
Yes.
go through the slides? So,
Yeah.
This was reviewed by the Finance Committee, the early preliminary report. It might look alarming to people to see our liabilities went up close to 62% on current liabilities, but there's a very good explanation behind that. So I think it's worth to our audience to at least identify why there is that sharp increase. I think I know the answer, which is that we have a lot of ongoing projects right now that are where the payables are due. Isn't that true?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is we have our statement of we have assets and our liabilities. Yeah, our current liabilities have changed. They've increased by what's shown here on the slide is 62% roughly.
Yeah.
So the question is, hey, what's with the big increase in liabilities?
Yeah, and so the current liabilities are going to be anything that's due in less than a year. And so certainly any outstanding bills for ongoing capital projects. We had a number of large projects under construction at the conclusion of the fiscal year, so that could be absolutely a part of it. Although I do not know off the top of my head exactly the breakdown on that line item.
Okay, going to the income statement. So our operating revenue, it is $131.5 million, which is $2.1 million less than the previous year. And our operating expense is $137.2 million, which is $13.5 million higher than the previous year. And out of the $13.5 million, $8.4 million is increase in the general and admin expenses, and $4.6 million is increase in supply of water. And most of the $8.4 million that's in the general and admin expense is an increase in the pension and OPEB expenses. Going to the non-operating revenue, we see a $7.1 million compared to $13.7 million, which is $6.5 million less than the previous year. And this huge decrease is mostly due to loss on the old meters that were replaced by the AMI project. So those meters that had a value in it were replaced, and we had to put the loss there, and that was around $13 million. So our net income before capital contribution is $1.4 million, which is $22.2 million lower than the previous year. And our capital contribution is $13.9 million, which is $6 million less than the previous year. And our changes in net position is $15.3 million, which is $26.2 million less than previous year. So we started the year with the net position of $633.5 million, and we're ending the net position with $648.8 million. And that $15.3 million difference that you see, you could also see it on the previous slide on the changes on the net position.
All right, I'll take things from here. Thank you to the directors for allowing me to present today. As Mr. Wunderlich mentioned, my name is Dan LaHaye. I'm a director with Baker Tilly. This is our second year doing the audit of the district, but I want to provide a little bit of background on our firm, just to provide some clarity. Baker Tilly, we have a specialized energy and utility practice, which is where I work. So in the 14 years that I've been working for Baker Tilly, my entire career has been spent working with municipal utility organizations such as yourself. And so what we try and do as part of our audit process is not only complete the requirements as dictated by professional standards, but also provide your staff value-added recommendations and items that we see at other organizations that might be helpful for you all to know. So anyways, to cover what we're going to go over today, we're going to talk a little bit about the audit overview, what's the audit process, what were the end results. We'll talk a little bit about our required communication to you folks as the board. Professional auditing standards require that we communicate certain things every single year, and we'll just point out sort of the high point bullet points for those. Part of that required communication is addressing internal control, and we'll talk in more detail about that. And then before we finish up, I do have some financial metrics and slides of my own that I can provide as sort of an outsider's perspective and some of the ratios and key metrics we look at. We'll have time at the end of the presentation for questions, but certainly happy to answer any questions that we have live here. All right, so as Mr. Wunderlich had alluded to, we issued several audit deliverables. The biggest and most comprehensive one is the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, and it is comprehensive. I think I counted, it's about 96 total pages of content that your staff prepares on their own. Within that ACFR packet is our audit opinion, and we'll talk about the results of that audit opinion. I'll point out that the section that Mr. Wunderlich had referred to as the management's discussion and analysis section. I always like to point this out to board members because it provides sort of a condensed, easy to read summary of the year and the financial changes that have occurred. So if you don't have time to read 96 pages cover to cover, that gives you about 6 pages of summary in a nice digestible format. And it is written by management through their prism and through their lens. Additionally, we've also issued, like I had mentioned before, our required communications to the governing body. That document is also called the Reporting and Insights from the 2024 Financial Audit. And just as an aside, I'm referring to all of these deliverables. By no means you have to scroll through them or go to them. These slides are meant to sort of summarize the most important points. Another deliverable that we just recently issued is new to the district this year, relative to 2023, is the report on federal awards. This is a specific audit relative to the federal funding, the federal dollars that the district received from the Department of the Interior for the AMI meter project. So we did a whole separate audit as it relates to that, and we'll talk about the results of that too. Lastly, just a few other deliverables to point out. We do issue an agreed upon procedures report as required by the California statutes. We do also issue the report on revenue bond compliance, which we were pleased to report there were no compliance issues there. And then, like I had mentioned, we do provide those recommendation letters to management. Those are things that we aren't required to communicate to the board. They don't rise to that level, but again, they're just sort of meant to be value adds, things that we see as maybe best practices. Continuing on about the audit process, the audit was conducted with no difficulties. The district's finance team was very responsive and very well prepared. We did a sort of a hybrid approach to the audit this year, where we had 3 weeks of dedicated field work. 1 week in July, we came on site for a few days to plan our audit. That's called our preliminary field work. Here is where we sort of gain an understanding of the district and its internal controls to design our final audit fieldwork procedures. Final audit fieldwork is really digging into the numbers and auditing the underlying balances. We did that over a 2-week period in September, 1 week from our offices, and then 1 week here at the district's office. Last day of fieldwork was at the end of September, and there was one item that we did note. There was an immaterial audit adjusting journal entry that was identified. However, that adjusting journal entry did not impact our opinion or our report on internal controls in any way. Continuing about with the audit overview, here's sort of the main areas that we focus on, the significant transaction cycles that we review and focus our time on. I'll say there's no, and these are all sort of typical of what you'd expect to see in a municipal water district. There's no unusual risks relative to an audit that are unique to the district, just sort of the standard audit risks that we're required to evaluate and review and design our audit procedures around. So as Mr. Wunderlich had alluded to, we issued an unmodified opinion or clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that you can receive, and is what you should expect to receive every year. So what does this mean? It means that you as directors can take comfort and confidence in knowing that the numbers that are presented to you on a regular basis are free and accurate and are free of material misstatements. Also pleased to report as it relates to that specific audit we did relative to federal funding. We noted no instances of non-compliance there and that the district complied with all the requirements as dictated by the federal government. The next few slides, I'm going to kind of gloss over. These are those sort of required auditors' communications that I had mentioned before. A lot of these items are boilerplate and don't really change a whole lot year to year. A lot of them are sort of a no news is good news type thing. You know, we have no disagreements to report or anything to that extent. I guess the things I would point out within this section, there's a few of them. One, there were no new accounting, no new accounting policies or standards adopted during the fiscal year. Baker Tilly did remain independent throughout the audit process. And then also within one of those required communication letters, there is a management representation letter. I point this out to directors just to know that, you know, we don't do a full audit of every single transaction. We do sample-based testing. We do rely on management making representations to us, and those representations are shown in that letter that's actually signed by Mr. Wunderlich and Mr. Stevenson. So I'm going to just skip through these ones. Those are sort of the main bullet points to point out. As it relates to internal control, the objective of the audit isn't to provide an opinion on internal control, but rather we have to obtain an understanding of internal control so we can design our audit procedures to effectively do our audit. The standards do require that if we identify something that's material or significant warranting your attention, we would have to communicate that to you. So pleased to report there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified as part of the district's audit. So the combination of the unmodified opinion and the no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies is a very high bar, and should be commendable, and the district staff should be proud of that. Recommendations to management, again, these are those value adds that we had. These aren't material or significant. There were 3 items identified this year. None of them are unique to Alameda. They're common issues that we come across in the utility world. We did have two recommendations from last year's letter that have been addressed and have been cleared. And within this letter, management has also provided their response to these recommendations. So if you're looking for more detail, that was also included in the packet as well. All right, so moving along to financial results, we sort of have a trend graph here showing the results of operations over the last 4 years. The teal line at the top shows your operating revenue, and then the sort of orangish red line shows your operating expenses. As you can see, operating revenues did decline slightly or remained relatively flat. The main cause of that was a decrease in facilities connection charges. Sales of water did actually increase this year. And then you'll notice that the operating expenses increased $13 million. The main cause of that, as Mr. Cho alluded to, was I'll call them non-cash expenses, right? They're due to changes in your pension and OPEB obligation estimate, right? And so it has nothing to do with how you're funding that obligation. It's just based off of an actuarial estimate. Additionally, there was an increase in depreciation expense, which again is non-cash. The district did have a $4.1 million operating positive cash flow. So good results to see there, despite how this graph may look initially.
Quick comment on this slide.
Yeah.
When your operating expenses exceed your operating income, you have a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
We can make it up with different ways. But it strikes me that that is the first time I recall in recent memory that we've had this experience. And I would encourage the board to take a look at that to see, because I'm surprised our expenses have varied that much, but also our operating income is declining. We had an argument and mindset that we had that our rate structure would support an ongoing necessary operating income, and that we had enough base in our normal water supply that would be the case. Clearly, it's not. Expenses are continuing to increase. We need to increase our income. So I'd encourage the board to recognize this when they look at our rate structure, but more specifically, when we're going to go out and borrow money. One of the key measures that a lender would and bond rating company would look at, are you covering your operating expenses with your operating income? Or are you that person who has to take out a mortgage to cover their utility bills? This is worth noting, and it's something we need to correct. It's 1 year. If it goes more than 1 year, it may be called a structural deficit. This is a red flag. Thank you. A potential red flag.
Yeah, if I could just maybe reiterate some of the comments Mr. LaHaye made, that these operating expenses are not all cash items. The reason why you see, for example, a big drop in 2022 from 117 the year before down to 107 million has to do with how pension and OPEB obligations are recorded, which relates directly to essentially stock market performance in a prior fiscal year. And so those expenses that are recorded for those items are not cash transactions, do not relate to how we're funding our obligations or even the progress we're making on a long-term trajectory in funding them. and they can fluctuate substantially from year to year. And that's the overarching or the primary reason and why you're seeing those increases. Now, there are other increases. He mentioned water supply costs, and there are other general increases. But the magnitude is driven primarily by year-to-year fluctuations. And my guess is next year we're actually going to see operating costs come down because we just had a good year with the CalPERS investments. And so there's a very strong possibility that those pension and OPEB expenses, as they're reported through that actuarial process, will come down. And then one of the points he made regarding revenue is that our operating revenue is not solely water sales. There are other elements to what's included in operating revenue. I believe Mr. LaHaye noted that our water revenues actually went up, but it's our new construction, our new connections to the system, our facilities connection charges that went down substantially and is actually driving much of kind of the flatness or slight reduction in the operating revenue. And those funds are actually used exclusively to fund capital projects and are not used for kind of the day-to-day treatment and distribution maintenance expenses of the district. And so I think those, again, they are considered operating revenues. When we go through and we do a rates process, we're actually looking at our cash needs. And so if we are looking at cash inflows and outflows, it would look potentially quite a bit different than what's being presented here. And that's what the board does review with the budget and with the rates process.
Thank you for the explanation. I understand, but I would encourage us to be cognizant of the need for revenues to cover expenses, and that is particularly if we're going to go out and start borrowing money, that metric, you be cognizant of that metric. Thank you.
Appreciate the comments. Okay, so, that's just sort of a snapshot of this year. Let's take a look at some other key metrics that, we also like to point out and highlight. This next one here shows sort of your net position versus net plant, or in simpler terms, maybe like a debt to equity ratio, which would be more common in the private industry. But what this graph is representing is what percentage of your infrastructure system is funded by debt, which is the red chunk of the graph up top, which averages around 15% or so. And then the larger teal portion on the bottom there represents the portion of your plant in service that's funded by equity or rates. So you can see this is strong. We'd recommend like a minimum of sort of a 50-50 split. Obviously, would favor more equity funded than debt, which you're demonstrating here. Another key ratio that's evaluated by the outside world, particularly rating agencies, is the unrestricted funds on hand, or unrestricted cash reserves. And so that's what we've shown here over the last 4 years. You can see the teal graph shows the actual, the district's actual cash reserves as of 2024 through 2021. And then the sort of red orangish color represents sort of a minimum recommended amount of reserves, which equates to about 150 days of operation. So you can see this here, the district's demonstrating a very strong cash position here. This year, that green graph represents about 15 months worth of operations. Prior year and the prior 3 years were at about 18 months. So it's gone down. But it still is in a very, very strong position that would be looked upon favorably from the outside world. Another calculation we always like to point out is the debt coverage calculation. What this graph is sort of meant to represent is, the adequacy of the district's rates versus covering its operating expenses and paying its debt service. So the green graph represents the revenue that's available to pay debt service, whereas the red color represents what your debt service obligations are as of today. So if the two graphs were evenly matched at the same spot, you'd have a debt coverage ratio of 1.0. The current debt ratio coverage calculation comes out to about 4.5 times. Prior year was at about almost six times. So again, it's gone down, but it's still in a very, very healthy position. So with that, I just would like to also provide a thank you to the district staff. As I mentioned before, they're very well prepared. They provided us all of our information requests that we had, very quickly answered questions. We do a lot, like I said, we do a lot of utility audits, and you guys are by far and away one of the most organized groups that we tend to deal with, so we really appreciate that help. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the directors may have.
I'd like to make a comment in appreciation of all the work that Baker Tilly did. I've been a member of the board since 2010, and we've gone through 3 or 4 different audit firms. And I think the interaction with you and our organization really has been exceptional above any of the other agencies that we've dealt with. Not that they weren't good, but I really appreciate, especially on the finance committee, where we have been able to do the deep dive into our financials, which we're not doing tonight, and have your colleagues on your team who are dealing with a lot of different organizations really know what's going on internally here. So I just want to say, as a member of the public representing this district, I really appreciate everything that you're doing.
And as the other half of the finance committee, I want to thank you, and particularly your involving the board members in the committee in your process. Thank you.
Comments, I just like to thank you to you and the staff. This is a great report. Thank you.
Thank your colleagues.
Yeah, do we have a comment from the public? Ken?
And I do want to respond back to Director Sethy's question about the liability increase. And that is because we had a $14 million increase of payment after July 1st. So it's an expense, but it's a liability. So we had an increase of liability that we paid after July 1st.
Thank you. Thank you to our own internal finance staff too.
Okay.
Can't do a proper audit without the other half
Yes, very much so.
working hand in hand, right?
I asked.
Yeah, and I guess I do have one more slide here, sort of along the lines of what Director Sethy and Weed had alluded to. You know, we do work for the board while we interface with your staff for the most part. We do welcome any comments and questions from the board now or throughout the year. And so with that, this sort of opens up the lines of communication to you all. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. I have my information on here, as well as Jody Dobson, who's my boss, who actually signs the audit opinion. So thank you again.
Okay, we have one comment from the member of the public, Mr. Nishimara. Go ahead. Had your hand up.
Okay, thanks. No, again, as a member of the public, having sat through this, it's clear that the district's finance team has done an excellent job, and that the district's, reporting of its financial state is true and accurate and meets all the accounting standards. And for that, as a member of the public, I can trust what is being presented to the board, and that there should be no surprises. And that brings a vote of confidence. So for that, I thank the district, its staff, for running the district in a true and completely, I'm sorry, a true and honest manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a staff recommendation. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the audit report.
We have a motion and a second. Further comments? Secretary, please call the roll.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
Akbari, and Gunther.
Aye. Beyond 512.
Okay, 512, we're getting there. Authorization to execute a cost sharing agreement for a water main relocation, design, and engineering services for the City of Newark Central Avenue Overpass Project, and I'll ask Mr. Awoke to address this item.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members, community members, and staff. The City of Newark has a major transportation corridor improvement project that will construct a railroad crossing along Central Avenue in Central Newark. The overpass project will include an elevated bridge over 4 Union Pacific Railroad tracks and build approach ramps at nearby streets. The district, as you know, owns and maintains water lines within the public right-of-way as well as privately owned easements and within the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. We have found that the proposed improvements that the city is working on are in direct conflict or are impacted by the city's project. And in accordance with the California Streets and Highway Code, the district is required to relocate any and all facilities impacted by a project or in conflict with a project. And we have done some analysis and to provide the most efficient and cost-effective implementation of the city project as well as the district's utility relocations. We are recommending the use of a single consultant contract to design as well as perform engineering analyses of the main relocations and also coordinate efforts with other third-party utilities such as PG&E, Union Sanitary District, and other telecommunication companies. The district's estimated cost, including design and construction through completion of the city project, is estimated to be about $6 million. This is all-inclusive cost. And the district's estimated design and engineering cost only at this point is, which is before the board tonight, is about $325,000. And the agreement includes a cap of $400,000. Staff has reviewed these costs and determined that the estimated level of effort and cost are appropriate for the work to be performed. I do want to note that the city actually approved the terms of this agreement, which is before the board tonight on October 24, 2024 at their city council meeting. With that, I'd like to read a summary of the staff report and staff's recommendation, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. The City of Newark has plans to construct a grid separation project along Central Avenue at the existing out-grade railroad crossing between Sycamore Street and Morton Avenue. The Central Avenue Overpass project will include an elevated bridge over Union Pacific Railroad tracks and build approach ramps at Sycamore Street as well as the two ends on Central Avenue. The district owns and maintains approximately 2,650 feet of existing water main within the public right-of-way on Central Avenue, Sycamore Street, Morton Avenue, Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way, and within privately owned adjacent properties. The district is required to relocate all facilities impacted by the project. A cost-sharing agreement has been prepared to address cost responsibilities associated with the design, engineering, and site surveying for the anticipated relocated water mains, fire hydrants and laterals, and water service laterals. The agreement does not include the cost-sharing of the construction work, which will be addressed in a future agreement. This item was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on November 6, 2024. Board authorization of these services will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 1.1, which is efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability. With that, staff's recommendation tonight is by motion authorize the general manager to execute a cost-sharing agreement with the City of Newark in an amount not to exceed $400,000 for water main relocation design and engineering services for the Central Avenue Overpass Project, District Job Number 21435, and the City of Newark Project Number 1014. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments I wish to make. This seems like a fairly innocuous item on the agenda to approve, but trust me, I have learned over the past year the complexity behind of reaching this kind of agreement with another partner, the City of Newark here in this case. It has been my pleasure to serve with Mr. Woke on the Aqua Local Government Committee Paving Standards Subcommittee this past year. And This is where we have been working on an effort with our subcommittee to draft up recommendations on how, what are the best guidelines for cities, counties, and various special districts on how best to work with these kind of issues where you have a lot of coordination that's involved and sequencing of events and everything like that. And I've been learning a lot from Mr. Awoke and his contributions to the subcommittee. And then on our latest draft, Mr. Stevenson also added some very good, thoughtful things that to share with the rest of the committee. I didn't respond back, by the way, but I did share it with everybody. And so we're going to review that at the upcoming Aqua Conference. So I'm very supportive of the staff recommendation. I can make the motion to approve, but this has certainly been quite a learning experience this past year. I just never realized the complexity of all the issues that are involved. And credit to the team for bringing it to this level of maturation here. Thank you.
Director Weed.
I'm fine, thank you.
No comments from me?
There we go. Mr. Nishimara is requesting a comment. I'll let him speak. I'll finish it off, but go ahead,
Oh.
Mr. Nishimara.
Sorry, did not mean to cut in line, but since you've asked.
Oh, no, quite all right.
Okay. My comment is really more of a question. It seems like the district is in a position where we are forced to relocate these utilities as a result of the grade separation project. I'm curious to know, well, I assume that when we relocate these pipelines, that they will be replaced with new pipeline. That is, you're not going to take the existing pipeline and dig it up and move it and put it back in place. If that's the case, I'm curious to know how much of the remaining life of the mains is going to be, lost. That is, we're going to be prematurely replacing lines that had useful remaining life left. And I'm just curious to know how much that's going to cost the district in lost life. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Mr. Nishimura. That's a great question. Coincidentally, the main along this road is one of the oldest in the system. One of the benefits of this project actually is the opportunity for the district to relocate an above ground concentrate discharge water line from our Newark desalination facility. So it gives us the opportunity to work not only with the city, but also with Cargill Industries to bury that pipeline that has been sitting on the ground for many, many years. But to answer your original question, the pipeline along this stretch of road is, 40, 50 years old. So it would have been incorporated into our main renewal program. But the fact that this project came along and necessitated the relocation does in fact impact the remaining service life. But in the big scheme of things, this would have come up in the next several years in our main renewal program as well.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe to put even a finer point on it. Yeah, effectively, there are two water mains involved here. One of them's an older transmission main, and it effectively has no real appreciable useful life left. And then the other main is newer. It's only about 21, 22 years old, but it was installed in a temporary fashion with the express intent to later relocate it at the time this grade separation occurred. So it's all according to plan.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I have another meeting to attend, so I'll have to bid you good night. Thank you very much for this meeting.
Night. My only comments with this project is we had it in committee, and this is one of those glory projects. You're dealing with the railroad, you're dealing with an old railroad right of way, you're dealing with a bridge, and you're dealing with the desal plant, all in the same location. It doesn't get any better than this. However, this is gonna be one heck of a project.
Hey, that's what makes it exciting for engineers.
And, we're talking about, I don't know the exact date this railroad went through here, but it's old. And, so this is a cool project. The history behind this area, it's gonna be one heck of a project to do though. So staff, good luck.
Thank you.
Further comments? Well, if we have a motion, we have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
I made the motion, looking for a
Okay.
second here.
I'll
Motion.
second.
Got a second? Secretary, call the roll, please.
Directors Wong,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
Ekbari, and Gunther.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Want to keep plowing along?
Let's continue to dig ahead.
All right, item 6 is reports. Starting off with item 6.1, board committee reports. Staff didn't have anything in particular that we wanted to review with the board, but we're happy to answer any questions. Seeing none and seeing no hands raised for our member of the public. Item 6.2 is operational reports. Ditto from staff's standpoint. Be happy to address any questions from the board or from the public. Okay. Seeing and hearing crickets, we'll move on. I'm to item 6.3.1. I'm really glad that we are not paying Chandler Asset Management by the hour. But this is an important item. We want to make sure that we're sharing this information with the board, and to kick us off, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wunderlich.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And for the benefit of the board, we do pay Chandler in accordance with the volume of funds they are investing on our behalf. But we do like to come to the board once a year to review the status of our investment portfolio. So the full board and public is aware of the care we take with the investment of our reserve funds. And so to present that report to us this evening is Carlos Oblitas with Chandler Asset Management, who's our primary contact and overseeing the day-to-day functions at Chandler with our reserve investments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wunderlich. Good evening, board members. I want to update you on the results of your investment portfolio through the past fiscal year, June 30th. Now we are coming to you in November, so I do want to update you on some results since that time as well to give you a preview of how you've started off your fiscal year. I also want to give you a background on what generated these results, and of course, any questions that you have for me, I'm happy to answer. If we look at the report, and perhaps if we can start on page number 8, I want to remind board members that the district has 2 portfolios. One is managed to a shorter duration target. The maturities primarily are maintained between 1 and 3 years with a duration of 1.7 years. The second portfolio is longer term funds that are not necessarily immediately needed. The intent of that is to push out that duration to generate higher return over the long run. That portfolio is maintained between 1 and 10 years with a duration target of somewhere around 3.5 years. Now, the portfolios through fiscal year end don't look exactly or near the duration of their benchmark simply because the district has been utilizing cash, and as a result, we've been allowing cash to accumulate so that the district can take it and put it to use somewhere else, like covering expenditures and that sort of thing. But the 2 portfolios in total equal somewhere around approximately about $156 million. They are invested in accordance with California government code, which limits the way that you're able to invest your funds. California government code requires that the objectives of this investment program are safety, followed by liquidity, and then followed by return. It means that you can only invest in fixed income securities. Those are bonds. You lend your money out effectively by purchasing a bond. You get paid interest at the maturity. At the time of maturity of that bond investment, you get your money back with your final interest payment. We manage these investments on an active manner. It means that we purchase with the intent to hold to maturity and collect the income. But if there's an opportunity to rebalance the portfolio, to move the return ahead, to increase the credit quality, to enhance liquidity, then we have the ability to sell before maturity, and we do unless we're building up cash, which is the case right now. The portfolio you see here is, and I apologize, and I meant to say start on page number 5. The portfolio on page number 5. What you see here is the shorter portfolio between 1 and 3 years. The target is 1.81 years. As of June 30th, it was at 1.6 years. The yield to maturity, that's the interest income that you are expected to earn into the future based on the way that the investments are structured, was 2.21, but your reinvestment, as measured by that market yield, was about 5% at the time. This portfolio is valued at $80 million, and if we turn 2 pages, you can see what the returns were for the prior 12 months ended June 30th, so that's your fiscal year. The return for this portfolio was 4.89. Now, you're looking at a yield to maturity of 2.21, so you're collecting interest income, and it was coming down because interest rates were coming down, but say you average somewhere around 2-3%, more like 3% in yield and interest income for the year, but your return was 489. How does that happen? Well, when we measure return, we show you not only the interest income you collected for the year, but we also factor in the change in fair value, whether realized with a sale before maturity or unrealized. And that's a holistic figure. We give you that entire return. That's called a total return. And the reason we give you that is because, number one, part of our job is to enhance that fair value component. And number two, of course, it feeds into your financial statements, which your auditor just presented, along with your staff. The second portfolio, and by the way, the 489, just to update you, through October, the 12 months ended October, this portfolio return was 6.52. Interest rates fell even more, and the diversification of this portfolio, which can actually be seen in the prior page, page number 6, if we back up just one page, that diversification and the duration position of this portfolio as rates fell caused this portfolio to go up in value and hold on to its income stream longer. And this is part of what shifted that return through October at 6.52 versus the benchmark of 5.76. So you did quite well. It's been a good year for you. Since inception, this portfolio, if we go back to page number 7, since inception, the return was, we've been averaging 1.05% per year versus 72 basis points, almost 0.75% for the benchmark. That encompasses a time period when, of course, we had the pandemic, when yields were near zero. So we've got several periods in there which account for that return. But that number through October for the prior, actually not for the prior, annualized since inception, the return was 145 versus 112. If we turn to page 8, this is the longer term portfolio where we can purchase securities out to 10 years. The target is 3.5, 3.6 years, currently at 3.32. The yield to maturity was 3.12 as of June 30th. Again, the yield to maturity is the interest income expected to be earned into the future. We were reinvesting at a 4.81. That's an average what we were able to get. The reason why that's lower, that reinvestment was lower than the 5% in the shorter portfolio, was because through the year and even through today, there was something called an inversion of the U.S. Treasury yield curve. In simple terms, it just meant that there was an anomaly that shorter term investments were paying a higher yield than longer term investments. And I can get into that in just a moment. This portfolio is valued at $76.4 million. Again, reinvestment was 481. And if we turn just 2 pages forward, the return for the year was 4.1 versus 344. If I move forward through October, that return for the prior 12 months was 766 versus 692. So a stronger return, and that's because of its longer duration position. Since inception, through June 30th that you see there is 182 versus 114. So we did quite well versus the benchmark. If I fast forward through October, inception to date, annualized, that return was 263 versus 194. And again, those are annualized numbers, the annual equivalent, taking compounding into effect. So what happened here? What's going on? Well, a couple of things happened. Number one, investors have been anticipating that the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, would lower interest rates through the course of the fiscal year. And the reason for that is because the economy had slowly been slowing down. By lowering interest rates, the Federal Reserve would effectively stimulate the economy to pick back up. Think about it like this. If they lower borrowing costs, it means that investors have more readily access to capital at a cheaper rate, and they're incented to go borrow and expand businesses, add to payrolls, hire people, homeowners want to buy a house, it's cheaper to buy a house. So the investors had been anticipating the Federal Reserve would do that through the course of the year. Chandler made a decision back in October of last year that it was very likely that the Fed would begin lowering interest rates sometime in 2024. Indeed, that's what happened. They meet 8 times a year, that's about every 6 weeks. They met in September, and they lowered that overnight lending rate between banks. It's called the federal funds rate. They lowered their target for that rate 50 basis points, 0.5%. The upper bound of the range was 5.5. It went down to 5%. They followed that up about a week and a half ago when they met again in, actually about a week ago, and exactly a week ago, they met a week ago tonight, and they lowered that rate yet again, 25 basis points. So it is anticipated when they meet again in December, before the end of the year, it's very likely that they will lower it yet again, and through the course of next year, there may be, when they lower it, it's called an easing. They may ease that rate even more. It'll be very data dependent. Why? Because inflation has been falling. If we turn to page, looking at page number 2, you can see consumer price index, which peaked out at over 9% in the summer of 2022, is now down to the 3% range. That's the chart on the left-hand side. They have a target for the inflation measure on the chart on the right-hand side, that's personal consumption expenditures. They have a target range of 2%. That rate has been nearing 2%. And when you look at, just back up one page, the employment picture, employment has been gradually waning. It's been normalizing. That's the chart on the left-hand side. Those are non-farm payrolls. How many new jobs are created? How many new jobs are added to the payrolls on a monthly basis? That's an interesting one. You know, we had an outsized number for the month of September, 223,000 jobs generated, and then the month of October was followed up with a dismal number, 12,000 jobs, which was much lower than anybody expected. But the trend is what we want to look at, and you can see that it's been slowing down, and unemployment has been spiking up just a little bit. So this is all a hallmark of an economy that has cycled through its growth stage and is now moving towards a mature stage and eventually into a slowdown. And in order to stimulate that economy to not bottom out, but not give it too much to where it becomes inflationary again, the Fed has been lowering interest rates. Now, the other part of this, looking into the future, and I'll stop with this, is that we will have a new administration come January. Most investors anticipate that fiscal policy. So when we talk about the Federal Reserve moving interest rates, that's called monetary policy, and that impacts the economy. When the government spends money or sets its budget, that's fiscal policy, which can also impact the economy. Most economists and investors anticipate that fiscal policy may change. It may impact taxes. It may impact several spending initiatives with the new administration. We don't know what that looks like yet. And investors are keeping an eye on that to see how it will impact portfolios so that we may position accordingly. But for the most part, for the full part, you've met your goals of safety, liquidity, return. You've grown the portfolio over the last fiscal year, and you've continued to grow it. The interest income to the district has been strong. The fair value has been outsized, which is a good thing, and we'll continue to do this. I will tell you from an operational standpoint, we've been collaborating very closely with your finance staff to manage this portfolio. This portfolio is not managed in a black box. They know exactly what happens in this portfolio. I mean, they can look at it every day, but we communicate regularly for cash flow purposes, for strategic purposes. So staff has a very involved role in this investment program as we aid the district to move this forward. I'll stop with that and take any questions that you may have.
I have a question.
Go ahead, and I'll follow.
I'm curious about something, and I'm wondering if you can offer some insight here. As the short-term federal funds rate has been coming down, Federal Reserve's been lowering things. I've noticed that the 10-year rate has gone from about 3.4 all the way up to 4.4.
Correct.
Why are things going in opposite directions? And I haven't read anything in the newspaper or business press. What's causing the 10-year rate to go up and the longer term rates to go up, which is more importantly related to mortgage rates?
Exactly. Director Sethy, let me maybe if we go to page number 4, I think it might be helpful. What you're referring to is the U.S. Treasury yield curve. So I mentioned that term before. All we're simply doing here, it's the chart on the right-hand side, is we're charting the yield of Treasury securities. So these are bonds from the U.S. government borrowing money from the capital markets. We're charting their yield on a given day. So each of those lines on the right-hand side represent a day. And we're charting those yields from 3 months out to 30 years. So that's across the spectrum of maturities. And what you're referencing here is this inversion that we're looking at, where the left-hand side of that chart on the right, the yields are higher than the right-hand side. Shorter maturities pay more than longer maturities. And to answer your question, I want to kind of explain what's going on here. When the Federal Reserve sets Fed policy, monetary policy, that really directly impacts investments that are 2 years or shorter. And when they raised interest rates, they went on in fact, you can see the history of those yields on the chart to the left. What you see here is the history of yields for 2, 5, and 10-year Treasury bonds. And you can see they went up from 0. Just look at the 2-year, which is that dotted line, the purple dotted line. It went from 0 all the way up to 5%, the 5% range. When they move Fed funds rate, it impacts 2 years and shorter. And they did that to combat inflation, which is a chart we looked at earlier, inflation that came about after the economy reopened, when the economy reopened after the pandemic. When they raised those rates, it had an impact on shorter term rates, which moved higher faster than the longer end. It's an interesting phenomenon because historically, when that relationship is inverted the way it is right now, it has pointed to a recession within the following 24 months. And that's happened 9 out of 10 times going back to the 1960s. There's no causality, but there's a strong correlation. That did not happen. Your question, I want to go back to your question because it's a very important question, and I apologize for being long-winded about the answer. You asked, why is it that now that the Federal Reserve is lowering the Fed funds rate, and you would expect that left-hand side of that chart to come down, you would expect all rates to come down.
Yeah.
Primarily because anything beyond 2 years is really driven by inflationary expectation from investors. And here's what investors are perceiving. Investors are perceiving that, we'll have a long-run answer and a short-run answer. The long-run answer is that investors are perceiving that the economy is not going to bottom out, that there's strength in the economy. And what are they looking at? So I mentioned that employment is slowing down. I mentioned that inflation is coming down. Those are signs of a slowing economy. But you still have a Standard & Poor's index. You have the stock markets have reached, by measuring the S&P 500, that's reached a record high 48 times this year thus far. You have a strong consumer sector that's still going strong. If we were to look at gross domestic product, the way that their economy grows, consumers have driven the most of that number. Every time we look at the growth numbers, the biggest contributor has been consumers, and they've done well because they had access to stimulus money from the pandemic, because they had access to strong savings after the pandemic, because their salaries went up after the pandemic, and those salaries have been sticky. So all these reasons, investors don't believe that the economy is going to bottom out. And as a result, what they do is they move money from longer bond investments, they pull them out and move them to the stock market. It's called risk on. They put on risk. And when they sell those securities, there's a quirky thing about the bond markets. If you're selling securities, it means that, as people are, they're selling things, it means that there's less demand, so the values will
I
come
get the
down
picture here.
and the yields go up.
What I find perplexing is that we just had a national election where the primary issue for a lot of voters was the rate of inflation over the last few years, cost of basic goods and groceries. And initially, when you heard that the Federal Reserve was going to lower short-term rates, I thought we might see the longer-term rates coming down gradually as well. Instead, it's like a forecast of more inflation in the future. And that seems to be the converse of what the voters' expectations are. And I'm not trying to indicate, where I am politically.
So I told you there's a long run answer. That long run answer is investors just don't believe that they think the economy is going to do better than most people think. So they're piling out of there, and that's what's keeping those rates elevated. The short run answer, of course, is a lot of investors perceive, now that this hasn't yet been proven, but a lot of investors perceive that the new administration will be very business friendly. So there was a rally, a massive rally in the stock markets and a backup in interest rates, meaning a bear market in interest rates that happened immediately. Rates shifted something like 20 basis points, 30 basis points in one day.
I know. I don't want to occupy too much time here, but I have another question for Mr. Wunderlich. What is the contract term with Chandler right now?
Yeah, so we did an RFP recently, and they were the successful proposer. And so I believe earlier this year, we re-upped for up to an additional 5 years.
And can you inform us what the compensation is to Chandler, please?
Yeah, it's based on our the size of our investment portfolio. So it's something like, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something like 6 basis points for the first 50 million they manage, and like 5 basis points for the next 50 million, and something like that. But based on our current the current size of our portfolio, which has been coming down as expected, as we've discussed in our rates processes, as we've been spending reserves on infrastructure investments, I would expect that it's between about $75,000 and $100,000 a year based on our current portfolio size.
Okay, thank you so much for all of your good work that you do for the district.
Thank you, Director. It's a privilege to be working with the district. It is.
Thank you.
You invest on the international market, correct?
For your portfolio, no.
No, this is a US-based portfolio?
That's correct. While we have the ability to purchase bonds from depository institutions that are foreign entities, we really limit that, and they have to meet certain criteria. Generally, it would be associated with some Canadian banks that are strong. You may see some of those flow through the portfolio, but for the most part, there's not a lot in international.
Well, given the November 5th event, the U.S. economy has, compared to other economies in the world, has been incredibly strong. And it's nice to have a U.S.-only portfolio, at least for this past 2 weeks. Thank you.
Good, thank you so much.
Are you well enough compensated?
Director, I'm a working man just like everybody else here, but I enough to be able to raise a family in the Bay Area and put two daughters through college. So yes, I am.
I'd just like to make sure that our vendors are not.
We're not. I drive a Honda,
It's all good.
Same here.
Thank you, directors.
Great. It's at 6:04.
Yeah, and just for the record, there are no members of the public online right now or in the boardroom. So we're just moving on to 6:04. I'll try and keep these short. First of all, director attendance at the Aqua Delta Conveyance briefing. So as is customary, the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Project as contractors are co-hosting a briefing on the Delta Conveyance Project. Kind of a large overview, a lot of information in a pretty short period of time. They're extending invitations to directors from the various state water contractor agencies to participate. You've all been invited, but you're not all welcome. Because we can only send two of you. Director, I did put out a note about this, early this week or last week. Director Sethy, I think, indicated that he's got a conflict. So we do have 2 open seats available and 4 unspoken for directors. So I thought this would be an opportunity if you all wanted to signal whether you had plans to participate or not, so we can work out any sort of Brown Act problems.
This is right around noontime on Tuesday, and I think both Director Weed and I are in committee meetings.
Yeah, sorry that I didn't mention that. It's Tuesday, December 3rd. It's at 1 p.m. and it's at the Marriott.
I'll let you know.
I
Okay.
need to check my travel schedule. I don't think I would be down there quite around 1 on Tuesday.
Okay.
One question. Which hotel are we staying at?
Well, I think we're staying at all kinds of different hotels based upon when we got a room.
Because the Marriott, from my knowledge, is several miles away from where I thought we were staying.
Yeah, I'm not sure where everybody's staying. I do know that the rooms went really, really fast, as is usual, and we tried to jump on it as quick as we could. But I do know that some of our folks who say weren't on the executive team until, a couple weeks ago, they got the short end of the stick and are going to be taking a long, Uber ride to get around. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, and so Mr. Salinas might have some more detail.
Yes, all of the board will be staying at the Marriott Desert Springs Villas 2, which is directly adjacent to the hotel conference. It's on the same property. It's actually, I've been told it's connected to that hotel. It's almost like a sister hotel.
I see.
You're welcome.
And this is a new venue for us, Palm Desert.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I would ask that would you please let me know, I don't recall what the drop dead deadline is, but they are asking for us to let them know. And I do want to make sure that we don't have a problem with too many of you showing up at the same time. Okay, quickly, 6.4.2 is customer portal for lead and copper rule revisions service line inventory. And I'm going to ask Mr. Stevenson, unrelated, to quickly give us a heads up about this.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, unrelated. Good evening. The district will be posting an interactive lead service line inventory map on our website. It'll be going live tomorrow, Friday, November 15th. The map portal was previewed with the Operations and Water Quality Committee at the October 1st meeting. Recent updates to the lead and copper rule revision require water agencies to inventory service line materials on both the public and private side of the meter to identify if services are lead or galvanized piping downstream of any lead pipe or fitting. The lead service line inventory was completed and submitted to the state by the October 16th, 2024 deadline. The majority of the information, or the inventory information, was collected over the past few years in conjunction with the AMI project. In addition to submitting the inventory information to the state, water agencies serving more than 50,000 people are required to provide the inventory information online. So the district developed an interactive map. The map allows customers to type in their service address and view information on the service address's pipe material as recorded in the district's inventory. The inventory provides information on the pipe material for both the public, which is the district side, and the private side, which is the customer side. All of the district's approximately 87,000 service lines on the public, our side, have been identified. However, there are approximately 130 private side services that have yet to be identified and are considered unknown. Customers with an unknown service line were sent individual letter notifications this week, informing them of their status within the district's inventory And that's also a requirement of the lead and copper rule revision. The district plans to identify the outstanding unknown service lines over the next several months, and the district's inventory will be updated as new data is available. And that concludes my report.
Okay, any questions about that? Just, we wanted to let you all know about this because you maybe ask questions about it. I mean, it's a new thing that's on our website that our customers can see their own, but also their neighbors' service lines, and that's kind of the rule, and so we have to comply with it. And so we wanted to give you a heads up that that's what was happening. Okay, finally, really quick, this is hot off the press, and so I don't have a ton of information about it, but I do know about it because of our rapid alert notification system that lets customers know when we have issues in the system and things like that. We had a water main break this afternoon, late this afternoon, in the Mission area on Mission Boulevard, a 14-inch water main. We had a break. We had to shut the main down completely. And so our crews are out there right now working on things. These things are often, difficult to resolve quickly, but we're working really hard. As I understand it, we've already done a good share of the work. Our RANS notice indicates that we intend to have the water main restored by 1 a.m. Usually we way over perform our estimates, but you never know. So we have about 100, the estimate right now is about 100 customers that are out of water service at the moment. We are communicating via our RAN system. We are, responding to customer questions and calls and so forth. When the water is restored, there'll be probably some discolored water that's in the system that will require some flushing and so forth. We'll do our best on our end, but oftentimes customers will experience discolored water after an event like this.
What is the nearest cross street?
So it's on Mission Boulevard at Pine Street.
College.
Yeah, it's right, just a little south of Ohlone, is where the water main was removed from service. But it also affects neighborhoods on both sides of Mission Boulevard right there, right? Because you got branch connections to that main. So we're working as quick as we can to get that water service restored. So I just want to let you all know about that because you may be receiving questions and calls about that too. And maybe I'll just turn to Mr. Stevenson, unrelated, just to confirm if you have any further updated information on that.
No, excellent summary, Mr. Stevenson, unrelated.
Okay, great. Okay, that completes our general manager's reports.
Do we have any idea what the cause of the break was?
I've heard, and we often don't know details until sort of afterward, but I heard that it's an issue with a collar on an ACP main. This particular main is in our main renewal program as a priority main. You may recall seeing a big chunk of water main running down Mission Boulevard as being a priority for main renewal. And so this may give you a sense of why.
It's got an early start.
Yeah, got a piece of it done this evening. Okay.
Thank the staff out
Yeah.
there. Okay, well, I think we're into director's comments. Director Weed, October 17th.
No, I'm sorry, I missed a couple of committee meetings and the last workshop. I had a incident coming back from a DCA meeting in Sacramento. I am now a 78-year-old workers' comp claimant.
Is this the meeting by chance?
And learning the experiences of firsthand for how that system works. It's remarkable. It's a learning experience.
On Tuesday at our finance meeting before the Thursday event, we were informed that so far this year we had 0 incidents of any claims for workman's comp.
We have 242 people out there
until
working in trenches and around heavy equipment. It takes one of you all to screw up our record. Just kidding. Of course, we're happy that you're okay.
I was walking across the parking lot, the car backed into me from behind. Not very fast, but the tumble resulted in the break at the top of the femur, and now I have a new titanium hip. Thank you.
We're Really happy to see you. Good health.
Happy to see you this evening. Okay, Director Sethy.
Okay, I got three reports actually. So Water Education Foundation, Water Summit. It's been once before, some years back. This was well attended. There were about 200 people there. And, couple of noteworthy things was, one of the assistant general managers for Metropolitan was one of the guest panelists, and he was talking extensively. And also about the Delta conveyance system. Tried to inform people that Net owns 5 islands in the Delta and is actively trying to work with people throughout the Delta to ensure that if there ever was a Delta conveyance system, that, you know, they're good partners to work with and would help to rehabilitate communities and contribute and all that kind of stuff. Bottom line of what I heard from him was they've got 3 major projects that they're working on. One was announced, I think, just today, which is the pure water project and recycled water that would be going into their underground basin and then pumped back out later on. That's $1 billion or close to it. The West Side Pipeline from Diamond Lake Reservoir all the way out to Santa Monica. That's several $1 billion, maybe 5 to 7. Not a cheap project. And then their Delta conveyance project. So he seemed to indicate that they're taking the middle road on each project in recommendations to the board. We did have a copy of their board presentation from October 7th that was made, which encouraged the board, which is 38 members, to fund the moderate case, which is what we were talking about earlier today. You have to remember we're a private company for the most part. So he was sharing a lot of his personal thoughts, which I found most comforting, which is that he felt optimistic about the board, even though they're divided, that ultimately they would support all 3 moderate business cases moving forward. So we're going to have they're going to take a vote in December, and we're going to have our next Delta Conveyance Finance Authority meeting in January for an update after that. Second, I had a really nice discussion with Carla Nemeth, who was our morning guest speaker. And at the break, the governor had just announced earlier his support for trying to streamline projects that are involved in desalination and brackish water desal. And so, since I knew that she worked in this area at Zone 7, you know, earlier in her career and everything, she was familiar with our brackish water cell plant. And so I talked to her about the cost and that, you know, there are a lot of places in the state where we could expand brackish water desal. And so she pointed me to Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, where they've been doing a lot of innovative work on new technologies to lower the cost of seawater desal and brackish water desal. And then also water softening. I gave those articles to Mr. Stevenson for circulation here among our staff. But she was the one who pointed, I didn't write you the note. She was the one who pointed me in the direction of these things. And since she said, I'm familiar with your district, really, you're going to see the cost of HHU water escalating into the future. One of the things you might want to look at is this water softening technology, which is very inexpensive maybe do a pilot project with Lawrence Livermore. And you could potentially save millions of dollars down the road. And so she said, you really, really need to take a look at this. And then I was fascinated by the new brackish water desal technology that is dramatically lower in cost than we have. Allow me, if I may, to send an email copy of those things to Mr. Stevenson, and then you can circulate
Yeah, I
it among the
can
board.
send out more information to the
Yeah,
board.
yeah. I only gave you the hard copy, but I'll send out these very concise technology articles about what Lawrence Livermore is working on. And there were some other fascinating discussions. So many people upset about Contra Costa exiting out of Los Vaqueros Reservoir. I mean, furious state officials that are just like, and federal officials, just, I mean, can't express it even strongly enough. Absolutely furious. And so that's the extent of that day. Next, yesterday we had the Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA meeting, and I can summarize it very easily. Mr. Wunderlich was there. We're now engaged with going through the dissolution JPA. It's the bottom line. So next steps are just to figure out how we get all that accomplished. Last thing, I attended a most interesting conference last week in Monterey. It was a 3-day conference, but only open to non-members on Thursday, which was the California Water Association meeting. I drove down early in the morning and came back late at night. And this is the association of all the regulated water, wastewater utilities in California. And so I was getting to have a seat on the other side of the fence. And it was really, really interesting. And I learned so much there in one day, and what a different world they live in. Some of the highlights were, we had just taken a look at doing tiered pricing by class of customer, and learned that most of the private water companies have already moved to discriminating pricing for CII customers. So they are signing, in some cases, like with Cal Water and San Jose Water, they're signing contracts with their water customers that are CII at an elevated price at the encouragement of the PUC to keep the rates down for their residential customers. Number two, they were all talking about the escalating cost of electricity for the water utilities, and that the whole AI revolution right now is causing this excessive demand that is exceeding supply, and nobody knows how to deal with it. The president, CEO of Cal Water was saying our highest rate used to be in Hawaii, where we paid 40 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, all of a sudden, California is rapidly, going through the roof in terms of electricity costs, and this has to be passed on to the consumers. There were some good AI presentations on direct solutions that people are working with. PFAS is a big issue for everybody, and they're dealing with the same issues there. And lastly, I will mention, I spoke earlier to Mr. Stevenson about this. We have There were 4,000 private water utilities in California in 1980. By 2000, that was down to 400. Now we're down to about 90. So there's this immense consolidation of private water agencies, and the PUC and the state water board, you know, they're trying to push these consolidations and acquisitions. Lastly, I learned that their board members make a hell of a lot more money than we do. And it pays to be on the private side if you can. So it was a really interesting conference.
Their staff makes, the senior staff makes a lot more money too than our, as seven-figure incomes are not unheard of.
And I want to thank President Gunther for allowing me at the last minute to go attend that conference. It was, I can share more later on, but it was extremely interesting.
I would note that quickly that the selected CEO, only at Bosca, was from Cal Water. He had been on the staff. He was the head of finance at Cal Water, and comes with an investor-owned utility experience, which may hopefully broaden the overall approach that Bosca has taken to the management of its system and coordinate. Actually, not management, the coordination.
I have a question actually for Mr. Miyake, which is, I got a position as a board member on a private water district. Are those incompatible offices?
I'd have to look at that if that actually ever occurred. So we should talk about it before you decide to do that.
$1,500 a meeting?
I got a couple of discrete offers.
All right. Well, we do have one additional item.
Closed item.
That's right. So I have 9:22, and our general counsel, would you like to read us into closed session?
Sure, it's item 8.1. We're going to go into closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9 subsection D2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one potential case. We can now convene into closed session.
It's 10:10, the board is back in open session from closed session. I'll ask council to read out our closed session.
Sure. The board met in closed session for item 8.1 pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9 subsection D2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one potential case, and no action was taken in the closed session, and that concludes the report.
And having nothing further on the agenda this evening, at 10:11, meeting is adjourned.